from Meat Eater's World News Headquarters in Bozeman, Montana, this is Cal's Week in Review with Ryan Cal Callahan. Now, here's Cal.
Hey, this week, Cal's Week in Review special drop. Special guest, Tony Peterson. Tony is, he's a arboreal tree dweller. He's a whitetail guy, in other words. But on top of that, and more importantly, more in response to everybody who writes in and stops me in airports and all that stuff, he's a dog dude. So if you love the Snort Report, you're going to love our new special addition to this feed, soon to be called Cowl of the Wild. Houndations, coming here for all of your dog needs. Okay? You don't have to do anything. You just get, not necessarily force-fed because you asked for it, but you just get a lot of extra educational, fun information right here. And it's stuff that you asked for, again. So you better like it. Just keep your feet open. Listen every other week to Houndations. What are they going to learn on Houndations?
Man, they're going to learn so much stuff about dogs.
Top three.
A lot of it will be based on our coevolution with canines and how that sort of feeds into what we should be doing with them today. I mean, in every aspect, right? Like not just bird dogs and how you should be training them to hunt, but how to give them a better life, better quality of life, how to work with them. There'll be a lot of training stuff on there too. Like, I'm like you, I'm big into getting my dogs to do what I want them to do the right way and asking them the right questions. And Houndations is going to cover a lot of that stuff.
Nice. Including like tying the rag on the fridge handle so they can get you a beer.
Yeah, that will be the primary objective.
Because when you say like evolution, I feel like that's the natural stopping point.
That's where we should end it?
Right. Like,
that's the peak?
How are we going to get better than that? Yes. That's a pretty good intro, right, Phil? Yeah. We're cruising. Yeah.
We're doing great.
Thank you, Phil. I have to stop every once in a while and get just like that pat on the back.
Right. Well, I mean, we don't really know where we're going with this, so we need Phil's guidance.
We don't, but there's a couple of things going on, right, where folks want to know how to select a dog, what breed. I recently and this is going to tick a bunch of people off, which is always what should happen when you're talking about these magnificent animals. I just talked somebody out of purchasing a red lab as their first dog ever because I've seen too many like goofy, weird things with red labs. And I'm like, listen, if this is your first dog ever, why get this genetic offshoot? Stick with the meat and potatoes. Yellow or black?
Well,
I prefer yellow.
Do they counter with the fact that red labs are actually just dark yellow labs?
No, they don't. They don't.
I know. I say that kind of tongue in cheek. It's true, but also what you're referring to is a really common mistake where people are like, I like the look of that dog. That's it. That's the end of their that checks one box. It's aesthetically pleasing, and that's good enough. But when you start getting into, this.
Yeah, I saw a lady on the trail yesterday, who she had like some Malamute thing. This is like a busy Los Angeles trail, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like all the, tight clothing that you can put water bottles in, but it's for cell phones. And this lady is hooked on both hands on this dog's harness, heels dug in, and that dog is dragging her down the hill because he just wants to come see our dog so badly.
Right.
To me, that wasn't a choice of, what I want? The attributes I want in a dog are, and this is how I came to this dog. I want to be drugged down a hill whenever my dog takes an interest in something.
Right. Man, so that situation, just like choosing a lab on color versus what's under the hood, you see it so often. And we look at choosing a dog as like, what can that dog give me? Right? Like what does that dog bring to the table for me? But we don't look at it like, what am I bringing to the table as a dog owner? And, people don't like they don't really even understand this, but if you own a dog, you're a dog trainer, whether you like it or not. I mean, you might take your job not all that seriously, but by default, that's what you're doing.
Well, yeah, if you're not taking it seriously, you're just being a trainer that trains really shitty behaviors, attitudes into the dog.
Right.
You're still training.
Right. Right.
You're just training in socially unacceptable things.
You're reinforcing stuff that you don't want in that dog. But yeah, I mean, I will cover this a lot because it's so important. And, I always tell people, like, the simplest way to look at it is if you go to buy a new truck, you're not like, hey, I want a red one and that's it. Or I want a black one or whatever. You're like,
right.
What does it have under the hood?
There's a dually 550
right
on one end of the spectrum. And there's a rear wheel drive only Datsun or Chevy Love from 1978 on the other end of the spectrum.
Yep.
All red.
Yep. Yeah. And to look at what a dog can offer you, you also, when you're picking them, you're looking at what kind of health issues might this dog have from these lines or just in general, this specific breed. So it'd be like going out and buying a truck because it's red, but those trucks also have a history of exploding on the highway after 50,000 miles or the tranny goes out or whatever. There's so much to it. And we don't necessarily want to offshore that choice to somebody, go to a pro and be like, hey, here's my life. Here's where I live. Here's how many dogs I've owned, whatever. So we just go, this is good enough. The dog will be fine. And we get really biased toward our dogs. I'm sure you might understand that a little bit, but it's not fair to ourselves and it's really not fair to the dog, and especially when you talk about that woman on that trail, if you don't know how to work with a big independent minded dog who might be driven, might need certain things out of life that you don't really want to give them, like a lot of exercise or a lot of mental stimulation.
Yeah.
You are setting yourself up to butt heads with that dog forever. And you'll love that dog. You will bawl like a little baby when it passes away.
Which, by the way, future dog owners, is what you're signing up for. Severe heartbreak.
Dude, I have a 11-year-old lab right now,
and
she's going downhill, and it is so hard to watch. But the hardest part about it is my daughters. This is the first dog they've known. So I have an 11-year-old dog and two 12-year-old daughters, and that is going to be like brutal.
Oh, yeah.
Brutal.
Yeah, absolutely. Ugh. Okay, so breed selection, not necessarily probably like breed by breed, but just like you're looking for certain attributes. Each breed has those attributes.
Right.
And then also, that longevity question, health obstacles along the way.
The genetics,
all good things
man.
to learn. Yep. And then some training stuff too, right?
Right. Yeah, I mean, people are weird, right? Like the lab is the most popular dog out there, right? The most popular sporting dog. And people will look at that and go, I don't want that because it's super popular. So they're going to go, I want some kind of maybe a little more obscure breed, something that's harder to come by. Out here you see a lot of these German breeds, which are great dogs, but they require a different level of commitment. Like you got to kind of understand what you're getting into. And so, I won't be going super breed specific on a lot of the content, but I will to some extent because a lot of people would just be better off going to find a well-bred lab with really good health checks in those bloodlines or something similar versus coloring way outside the lines to get something that's different for the sake of being different.
Yeah.
Because you're going to deal with some stuff that you might not with other breeds.
There's a big difference between dogs chasing things for fun and chasing things because they deeply within their souls want to kill it.
Yep.
Right? And a lot of those German breeds
right.
are like, they're not chasing the cats because it's fun.
No, it's not tag.
It's satisfying something deep within them that says, I have to chase and kill this thing.
Yeah. And that's one of the biggest things. And you see this too with the popularity of certain breeds. You saw this with golden retrievers in like the 70s and 80s. And then the bad breeding comes along. Once the demand goes up, you can look at like French bulldogs right now, some of the doodles, and you can watch these trends. And you see this, I don't see this as much with the German breeds here yet. It seems like there's still kind of a lid on that. But you got to really know what you're getting into. So not only do you have that aspect where they come from a place where they're not just bred to hunt birds.
Yep.
They're bred for fur, and they're killers. Like some of them, they can't turn down a porcupine or a raccoon or whatever. Like it's just in them. And if that's not, like if you don't want to find an emergency vet on a Sunday night because you went for a hike and your dog ran into a porcupine, that's a consideration. And you might think, well, I can go buy an e-collar and put a handle on them. And it's like, you probably can't. Like, you're probably not going to override that desire you're talking about. And so there's like a real level of, there should be a real level of honesty there before you make that decision.
Yeah. And I think like, boy, it's hard, but like if you, like pound dogs are awesome. But you need to be able to like kind of recognize the breeds that are within that pound dog. Because I've bumped into people who like they have a hound.
Mm-hmm.
It is a hound dog. And they are spending a lot of time and a lot of money trying to get that hound dog not to be a hound dog.
Right.
I'm like, all it is a nose and legs. Like that's all it wants to do.
Well, that's, I just had this conversation with some relatives, my wife's family, because they just got a German Shorthair pup. And they've always had German Shorthairs. And this is another thing that I'll probably get into in one of the episodes, is we get very married to a breed. And it's because when you get a dog, you're going to love that dog so much that you're going to be like, I have to do this again.
Yep.
But, it goes back to like, they don't hunt a lot. But they go get a high drive German Shorthair. And, GSPs are great dogs. Those German dogs are great dogs. I love them. But if you're not prepared to give that dog what it needs, you're going to deal with some real issues. Like you just are, because I look at them the same way I look at kids. Like kids trade in the currency of attention. Like they're going to get it by being bad or good, but they're going to get your attention. Dogs are kind of the same way. They're like, we need to go do something. Like I need to go do something. And they're going to figure out whether, they present you with some positive behaviors and you're like, oh, I'm going to reward that with more, throwing the dummy more for snort, or they're going to do something negative and you're going to give them attention either way. And it's just better to go the route where you have a dog you can probably work with for those positive behaviors and that positive attention versus always butting heads with them just because they're like, I need more out of life. And you either don't know what to give them, or you're just not going to do it for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm. They're endless topics,
right?
For sure. So you picked a good podcast to do. You won't run out of content.
There's a lot to do with dogs, man.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons that I wanted to do this, you and I have talked about dogs a lot, and we're both dog lovers, but the world, our world with dogs, like you can't separate us from them. Now, our history, like how we got here, what we used them for. And now when you see how many different jobs they have, like working with us, you can't divorce us from them. And I think that's so cool. And you start digging into it. And there are people training dogs they pick up from a pound to sniff out sea turtle nests down in Texas to mark them to help endangered species, like stuff where you're
my little sister's in school right now. She's got a pound puppy that is smelling out crack cocaine and heroin and stuff like that. That's his new job,
right?
And it's really good,
and he loves it.
Loves it. Yeah, for sure. So big thing that we got to hit right now is why you? What the hell makes you qualified to talk about this stuff,
man? Well, that's a good question.
Yeah.
I look at this, maybe this sounds stupid, but when I meet a person, if they love dogs or they love music, I'm just like kind of connected to them. And I think it's just something in our wiring, right? Like you and I both know people who aren't really into dogs, and whatever, that's great, but you just kind of have it. And so for me, you mentioned earlier about how, my place in the industry has been in the whitetail world for a long time. And I love whitetail hunting, but when that becomes your job, then you got to find these other things. And for me, always being a dog lover and really getting into the training side and just like getting exposure to my first really good dogs. And that was kind of through Tom Dokken, who's a good friend of mine. It just opened up this world to me, and training dogs and hunting with them and just taking them everywhere I can possibly take them just sort of was a hedge against the business side of having to be a whitetail guy. And it's just really something I love. And then I just started to get in deeper with it, with hanging out with some trainers and watching how they operate. And it just is something that I'm so interested in because I just love it. And I think,
well, that question, right, of like, is it repeatable? Right. I just dusted off the recurve last week and was shooting with a bunch of guys at this shoot, and it's like, oh, well, that's a really good arrow. I'm like, yeah. But if the second one's in the same spot, then we're doing something good.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
One arrow does not a group make.
Right.
Yeah.
And you can have, despite all your failures, you can have a hell of a dog if the stars align.
Yep.
Right. But doing it twice in a row is a big deal.
Yep.
Yeah.
But that's what,
or 1,000 times in a row, right?
Right.
If you're a pro trainer. So,
right. But that's the beauty in it. Right. And I think, like on the whitetail side, it's weird to me. I mean, I'm pretty comfortable with it, but it's weird to me how you sort of get the same questions over and over and over again. The process, even, if you're up north, northern Minnesota down to Louisiana, wherever, like the kind of fundamentals are the same.
Yep.
The location changes, whatever. There's variables, obviously. Dogs are kind of the same. It's kind of the same way where you run into somebody in the park and their puppy's jumping up and they're like, oh, I can't keep this 8-month-old dog from jumping on people. Or, my dog chews on everything or barks or whatever. Like there's a lot of problems that a lot of dogs and dog owners deal with. And there are solutions to those, And so it's like, part of it is just like, I didn't know that stuff when I got into dogs. I learned along the way, and then I just got really lucky and got to buddy up with some people who have more knowledge about dogs than anybody you've ever met. And it just taught me, I'm like, man, it's like almost like a public service thing here that I get to do around a topic that I just love, so it's just cool.
Well, yeah. On the, the feed, we get, tons of people asking like, hey, I'm considering this dog, or this time of year, or this breed, or, this is what I want to do. Is this a good dog? There's a gajillion ways to start. Right. Yeah, I'm sure you're the same way. It's kind of like, you kind of like the people who are like, no, I am way too busy. It's not going to work out.
Yep.
That's a good place to start.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
then work your way into making time and space for that dog in a lot of situations. But are you going to have some guests on?
We're kicking that around. We're kicking it around. I really like interviewing people in the dog world. So we're leaving that possibility open.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I would think like force fetch, right? There's so many different angles on that and approaches.
Right.
That'd be a good one.
Dude, like you said before, the topics are unlimited.
Yeah.
And it's when like you mentioned, going and pick up a hound dog and trying to train the hound out of it, or going to the pound and just grabbing a dog. Like we kind of look at it through the perspective of training for a task, like training to be, like something you don't want to scream at out in the field, right? Good recall, steadiness, whatever. But when you start getting into just the attributes that like transcend every breed and every situation, where you're talking like socialization and, aggressiveness with dogs and people and just like general behavior things, you really can't run out of stuff to talk about. There's a lot going on here. And I love that, because not only does that just exist as reality, but there's also, because of our love for dogs, like our just general love for dogs, there's so much research going into what makes dogs tick, and like stress responses and why certain dogs do this. And it's just, there's so much to cover.
Oh man, and it is just a changing world, right? Like if you were in a vacuum, like person in a cabin with a dog, you could probably choose not to talk to that dog very much. And over the course of a couple years of you just doing your thing, all of a sudden that dog is going to know exactly what you want. It's going to do what you want. And you're going to come to an understanding. And if you have like that untrained dog and you're willing to just hunt by yourself, by about the time that dog's like 6, 7, you're going to have a pretty good hunting dog. Chances are.
Right.
But it's just not really realistic with the way the world works. And like we have just like a way more litigious world these days. We have a lot of societal expectations that fair or unfair, like they exist. And man, you're bringing home a big liability if you're not willing to make sure that that dog's going to be a good citizen.
Right. And what you talked about there with our communication with them, that's the topic of the second show. And people maybe aren't quite aware of how much communication we have that's nonverbal with dogs. So we look at like, oh, I give them this command and I either get this behavior or I don't out of it. But the amount of communication, and this goes back to us at least 12, 15,000 years living with dogs and domesticating them, probably way longer. They know to look you in the eye. Like not very many animals. You can't go grab a wolf pup and have that already. Like you have an animal that even if you have to encourage it a little bit with treat training as a puppy, will look you in the eye for advice and direction. And we often don't think about body language that way. You know, you look at Snort in the cattails and that tail's going, you know, it goes from like side to side to helicopter. It's so excited. And you go, there's a bird right there. Like that dog's telling you something without telling you something. Or you knock a bird down, hunt dead or whatever your command is, fetch it up. And you're like, it's right here. You send her in there and she doesn't have that rooster. And she pops out and looks at you and she's telling you, hey boss, I know you think it got knocked down here, but it's no longer here. It went away, you know, or it's like, there's so much to it where it's just a product of us interacting with them and training them. And so it goes both ways. Like you were talking about before, where you can encourage the eye contact and the nonverbal communication, and you should, you know, I mean, it goes way beyond hand signals and stuff, but you're also giving them signals all the time without thinking about it. So, you know, like if just as an example, you have a retriever and you throw that bumper and if you're zoned in, that dog comes back, heels, then, you know, there's a whole series to that retrieve. It's not just throw it and have it run back. You turn around and talk to your buddy or you get on the phone for a second, that dog might run and just spit that out at your feet because you've already signaled that you're not paying attention. So it's going to see what it can get away with. Yeah. And there's a million little interactions like that we have every day that reinforce like our relationship, like how it's going to go and our behaviors. And that's, I mean, I could go way deep on this, but this is one of the things that makes it very hard if you have like a family like mine where I have a wife and I have 2 daughters and I'm the primary dog trainer, but everybody else is like a secondary dog trainer. And if they don't hold that dog to the same standard that I do, we know where that goes.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yep. And when you go hunting with that dog, it's a reflection of you.
Yeah.
And you can't be like, well, the girls who are in school right now, they're screwing this up.
Yeah, I'm not going to blame it on my 12-year-old daughters. Yeah. But you can tell, like with my dogs, I can tell instantly if, you know, say I'm out here in Montana right now, my kids and my wife have my dogs up at the lake. And when I go home, I'll be able to tell whether they use like a chuck it ball for my dogs or not, because my dogs will want to spit out that bumper when I work with them. And you can see that backslide instantly. Yeah. And so that's something I'll cover in the podcast pretty heavy too, is you have to also consider who else is responsible for this dog and what level are they going to put in. Yep. You know, because it's not going to be the same. If it's your dog, it's probably like family members, whoever, it's probably not going to be the same level. So you're going to deal with that. There's going to be an attrition rate there, and that's just how it goes.
Yeah. And there's a gold standard, and then there's several other standards underneath that.
Right.
That you may need to figure out because of your living scenario.
Right.
Not in the cabin in the woods anymore.
Right. Well, and not only that, but when you're in that situation, it changes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like the amount of time that dog spends with you versus them, versus how much exercise it's getting, versus a lot of different stuff. So you might think that you have the whole thing licked and you're like, yep, we're all on the same page. This is all going great. And some kind of variable changes, the environment they're in with them, something like that. And you have to sort of refigure out how to keep going with this. And that's one of the things that's really cool about dogs and dog training is you're not going to be done. You know, like it's a work in progress forever. I look at it kind of like you can't master whitetail hunting or, you know, elk hunting or whatever. Like I don't care what anybody says. Like if you're like, oh, I've got this figured out, you're like, okay, we'll go to this national forest or go out to the Eagle Cap or do something different. And you'll be like, oh, what I thought when I was killing these bulls on this pivot alfalfa field, I thought I was pretty good. And then I went into an over-the-counter unit somewhere, and now it feels like I don't know elk hunting.
Yep,
you know?
Absolutely. Yeah, and there's something here on Houndations that you're going to learn every single week because you will never be as good as you want to be. And the game's always changing too. So I got a 10-year-old lab to blood trail, and that added like 2 years of fun for that dog because she finally got to do something different.
Yep.
Right. And all sorts of stuff we can learn across the breed. So looking forward to it, Tony. And you listeners, you don't have to change. Just keep on doing your same thing. Here on the feed every other week to start with, at least, you'll get Houndations. So listen through, see what you need to pick up for the next puppy in your life, or how you can casually drop some hints to improving for that girlfriend's new dog, or your dad's new dog, or whoever decided to just buy that dog at the Murdoch's parking lot. You know, they could use some help.
They're going to need some help.
Yeah.
If you're buying a dog impulsively in a parking lot, you'll probably need to listen to the podcast.
Yes. All right, man. Thank you so much. Looking forward to it.
Thanks, buddy.